programs for anybody who wants to join in. So we would have programs, short-term programs, which are teacher-centric, specialist-centric, subject-centric in the summer, 2 to 4 weeks. You could join in this series of sharing ideas of young minds. And the purpose is that if there is something, you don't have to wait. If there is something in your mind which can trigger some good in human habitat, let's not wait till you become 50. You are in a position to command or your position to communicate. School would communicate on your behalf. The school would share your thought with those who matter or who are decision makers. The school would develop your idea if you would need to do that. To give it a shape that it is in a presentable manner. School would intervene in policies which your idea require as a backup to be presented to government and share with government those ideas or other decision makers those ideas. We would have other courses which are also, I would say, aspiration based. They may not be a formal training or a syllabus or a degree or something, but whatever exactly is required by society today. So we would deal with issues which affects us today. We would deal with issues which are likely to impact our habitat in years to come. So there would be a concept of research, concept of study, concept of learning. Teaching would be minimized. You see, the idea is that once you are a graduate, once you are a student of a particular subject, when you have some specialty, what we need is a facility, what we need is a faculty which can further activate your ideas and give it a shape so that we are able to contribute directly, effectively, and in very good time before things go wrong. So that's the purpose of this institution. It may also have formal courses of PRs, MRs, and all that in years to come, but we have already initiated programs which can directly be accessed by every student of architecture, wherever he may be, every practicing architect, every teacher, and all other people from allied professions. And architecture is such a holistic subject that it encompasses almost everything. And we are the best, the architects are best trained to reflect on those issues. So that's the objective. I extend a very warm welcome to all of you once again this morning. And let's hear Debayan. But before we get going, I would request Kamal to say a few words and motivate the participants. Share this thought with your friends who are not here today on this forum, and encourage them to share whatever they have in their mind. We would try to capitalize on that. We would like to help you develop that in whatever possible manner we can do. Thank you very much and very warm welcome once again.
Thank you, sir. Kamal sir, if you would like to say a few words for us.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So I'm out somewhere. So I will briefly say that Mehta sir has already put into words a lot of what I feel, what these are the objectives of this institute, and to become, let us say, a thought center, a resource center for all the built activities, urban design, architecture, and other things, and actively contribute to the society. So I would conclude at that today. So please go ahead.
Thank you, sir. So now I will introduce our speaker for today's webinar, architect Debayan Chatterjee. I request him to please switch on his camera. Debayan is a Cornwall scholar who has finished his MSc in Urban Development Planning at UCL in 2020. He previously gained an MSc from SPA Delhi after a BH degree from Jadavpur University. Currently, he is working as an urban designer with AE7 Dubai team. His current research explores the effects of time-space planning on Indian cities and argues that urban practitioners should start acknowledging temporality as the new reality. In 2020, he was invited to the Buckingham Palace to discuss his latest research findings on time-space planning with the Duchess of Sussex. Today, he will be talking about career options in urban design. I would request Architect Debayan to now begin his presentation.
Thank you, Tushar. Am I audible?
You are audible.
Yeah, let me just share my screen. Can you see my screen?
Yes, the screen is visible.
Okay. So yeah, hello everyone. Good morning. Thank you for inviting me today. And you know, the problem is, like, I would like to say that I'm having some internet issues today, and that's why during the presentation, at least, I will switch off my video so that we get an uninterrupted sort of flow. And then during Q&A session, I'll again switch on my camera. I hope that's okay. Um, so yeah, I mean, so today's topic is what I'm going to talk about is profession of urban design. So it's basically focusing on the role of urban designers in society and in what capacity you can look to work in after graduating from a program in urban design. Um, so this is where most of you are at right now, either you are students of architecture or architecture professionals and practicing architecture. So pursuing urban design, as an academic and professional career opens up a lot of trajectories and possibilities for you to explore. Taking the architecture project and understanding its intersection across different scales, time frames, social, economic, and public realm is really what starts to create the realm of the profession of urban design. But what is this urban design? So it has multiple definitions. So we can say that urban design is the art of making places for people. It's urban design is basically designing in between spaces, and then it's a discipline which is combination of both art and science, like architecture. And then obviously urban design is kind of it bridges between different disciplines like planning and architecture. So it's kind of multi-scalar. So as we can see, like it's a profession. It's a very new profession, which the term was coined officially around 1956 through a series of conferences hosted in Harvard University. So it's a pretty new profession compared to like planning and architecture. So it's like around 60 years. So it's still evolving, and various eminent scholars have different definitions, and there is not one single definition which can define urban design as a discipline. So the eminent scholar like Kevin Lynch, talking about urban design, which he considered to be project based and limited to the primarily aesthetic arrangement of buildings and spaces, whereas city design for him was a large participatory, interdisciplinary, and interconnected framework that deals with all the physical parts of the built environment to which the public had access. And then there is a group of scholars who actually feels that urban design doesn't have any definition. It's flexible, so it's very ambiguous, and it's basically it's a unique definition that the objective is similar. Whatever the approach is, it's talk about the processes and to ensure the well-being of the population in an economic, ecological, and socially sustainable environment. Now, I will be talking about the role of urban designers here. So, a lot of you might be enrolling in graduate urban design programs or thinking about pursuing urban design as a practice later on. So, I think it is essential for you to know in what capacity you may be working in after you graduate from an urban design program. So, for the sake of this lecture, I have outlined three broad classification of agencies that you can look to work in after your graduate degree in urban design. So first are agencies that essentially look at planning and design in a sort of top-down approach to urban design, including the government agencies, city agencies, municipal authorities, where you may have different roles like policy formation, scenario building, framing development control regulations. You may be looking at doing backup research and data analysis, or even reviewing various design schemes. You may also look at working for MNCs or private architecture firms, where you will most likely be involved in a lot of designing, for example, designing townships, master plans, or buildings along with social spaces. Um, while working with such MNCs, you may have interaction with the community, and depending upon the project, the client, and the scope, it may be driven by the organizations themselves rather than the project being driven by the community. However, this really depends on the kind of project and the client, and the kind of framework you are working in. And thirdly, you may also look to work for builders or real estate agencies, where usually the work of an urban designer generally involves a lot of economics, including, for example, feasibility of projects, reviewing design schemes, etc. Um, the second classification of agencies that I have outlined here are research and capacity building agencies, that are essentially organizations um, that work closely with and from within communities. Working with these organizations, urban designers may have to work in close conjunction with the people of a neighborhood to develop projects and identify stakeholders. These may include civil society agencies. I will also get into some examples later on. So, as urban designers, you may also look to be associated with academic institutions or think tank agencies, where you might be developing research projects in tandem with communities and various actors. Uh, there may be other agencies, including private entities, that you may also consider to work for. It is important to note here that there may be multiple other agencies that look to hire urban designers, and you should definitely explore them. So now I'll be talking about the various kinds of projects that you may be working on as urban designers. So the first kind of project that you may be working on as urban practitioner is a greenfield project, where the project starts off from a backend side. Either MNCs or government agencies or builders may look to develop or design these kind of projects. So essentially, the project is driven from the top organizational hierarchy. So, as urban designers, we may be involved in designing the entire master plan, public spaces, or developing certain regulations for the project, or sometimes even buildings within the development. As urban designers, we do face challenges in these projects. For example, when a greenfield project is being developed or designed, what happens to the communities living around the site? We do need to understand the issues associated, like gentrification and community displacement due to higher rents or property prices, etc. A lot of these greenfield developments that are being proposed in India and across the world are kind of failing because of issues like these. So sometimes these developments can be designed along a common natural resource, for example, a waterfront or maybe a forest. So the challenge as urban designers would be, how do we integrate the community with the new development so as to bridge connections rather than creating further divide. The other type of project that urban designers can look to work in is an urban infill project. So, for example, a revitalization project where the government agencies or hired MNCs create proposals to redesign certain sections of existing neighborhoods. Even though for these projects, there may be some kind of community interactions. However, the project is really, really driven from a perspective of the various agencies, So it really is a challenge for urban designers to be a mediator between the existing communities and what they really want, and the organizations looking for change and overhaul, and ultimately to the economic benefits. There may be other kind of urban infill or brownfield projects where the site may have certain existing private developments, and the MNCs, builders, or government agencies buy off these developments to essentially uh, create a greenfield site. The challenges for urban designers are then similar to those that I talked about for a greenfield development. Nowadays, urban designers are increasingly involved with landscape and environmental projects as part of landscape and urban design organizations. So working with landscape architects, designers, and environmentalists open up various trajectories for thinking in itself. So for example, looking at, generating an approach that integrates risk reduction with ecology and culture. So this is a project by Scape Design, headed by Kate Oaf, who is the director of the urban design program at Columbia University. The project is based in Staten Island in New York City as part of the Rebuild by Design initiative, looking at creating sustainable communities and landscapes along the waterfront of Staten Island. Now I'll play a video. Please let me know if you can't.
Staten Island was hit hard by Superstorm Sandy. Lives were tragically lost, and parks and homes were severely damaged. So as part of the Rebuild by Design initiative, our team developed a strategy that integrates risk reduction with ecological regeneration, and also with the fostering of sort of social resiliency and educational programs on shore. The Sandy-affected region is characterized by a high degree of potential risk and variability. So rather than propose a singular levee that could fail catastrophically, we focused more on building a layered system that creates a thick section between land and water, from stepped living shorelines and dunes to tidal flats and offshore breakwaters. We studied the landscape typologies that characterize shallow water zones to understand their protective benefit, and began to combine and test these systems through hydrodynamic modeling to understand their effectiveness as ecological infrastructure. This approach is replicable around the region, but is especially suited to the south shore of Staten Island, which has a deep cultural connection to the water. Early townships adjacent to Raritan Bay were centered around oystering, fishing, and clamming. Even through the early 1900s, its beaches were these super popular recreation destinations. We were inspired by this context to generate an approach that really integrates risk reduction with ecology and culture. What are breakwaters? Well, breakwaters are essentially rocky, sloped walls within the water column that can drastically dissipate destructive wave energy. We've explored subtidal beds as well as forms that extend above the high water line. Communities are protected by exposed breakwaters, whereas large swaths of parklands, which might benefit ecologically from some slow inundation, are paired with a subtidal form. They've been located with a careful eye towards sedimentation dynamics, water flow, and to avoid existing habitat features. Our study extends from Tottenville up to Great Kills. These breakwaters can help reduce heights of onshore structural solutions such as dunes and really preserve the cultural connection to the water for future generations. They also help revitalize water-based economies by protecting marinas and waterfront structures. This new layered infrastructure will clean and slow the water, catalyze the regrowth of protected ecosystems, and create an amazing textured environment for marine life as well as shore-based communities to thrive in. From a risk reduction standpoint, model results show an up to 4-foot reduction in wave height, which could ultimately affect the B zone and coastal A zone on shore. Dr. Philip Orton explains.
Well, the layering of coastal protections is important because sometimes one protection type, such as a levee, can fail or it can be overtopped. It's better to have multiple protections, and that can come in many forms. Having an ecological approach in one case would be to have oyster reefs or some kind of, or wetlands that reduce the flooding before they get to your seawall. We were reminded by Sandy that this region, northern New Jersey and New York City area, is susceptible to being hit by a hurricane, which hadn't happened in over 100 years. And so we were reminded that we have to deal with this issue sooner than we realized of sea level rise and natural storm surges that don't necessarily even have anything to do with climate change. In the case of the storm surge, Raritan Bay is sort of in a bad location, and Staten Island is very vulnerable to storm surge because it's in more of a funnel-shaped area where the storm surge comes in and it actually gets larger as it goes into the point of that funnel. A benefit of computer models is that they synthesize all the scientific understanding of coastal storm surge and coastal waves, and they give us an objective answer. And many people have an opinion or even political viewpoints driving what they think we should do about coastal flooding and sea level rise, but computer models actually give us an objective answer based on the best available science.
Beyond risk reduction, we've explored how the project can revitalize the Raritan Bay ecosystem and how specific materials, complex forms, and textures can engender life and biodiversity.
The rule of thumb is increase complexity and you'll get more biodiversity. And that's the reason we find so much biodiversity in oysters reef and in coral reef, and because there's so much complexity in crevices and holes and texture there. So there's a lot of ecological niches.
So as you can understand, urban design is it's basically it's an interdisciplinary discipline, and it's a kind of interfacing with landscape architecture, environmental design intensely, and becoming integrated. This opens up basically various possibilities of research and design. So understanding that the great diversity of environmental issues like water issues also means that these challenges become opportunities. So this was a project, a call for action open for multidisciplinary teams to develop a bankable project proposal around the issues of water. And the project was identified these three cities in South Asian context. So one is Chennai, one is Khulna, and the last one is Semarang from Indonesia, to try to create a system of water resiliency. The project was initiated by Netherlands Enterprise Agency, ARVIO, and boards including Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. Participants were NGOs, engineers, designers, educators, etc. The project was initiated because of the pressing issues of water and the fact that we will have a 40% shortfall in water availability by 2030. So, as urban designers, part of the One Semarang team were involved in research and analysis to map out the various issues of water like rainfall, flooding areas, coastal vulnerability, etc. So, like I have mentioned before, urban designers often work on a lot of research and analysis to create the basis of the different projects that they work on. And for the One Semarang project, urban designers, planners were also constantly engaging with the local communities to try and understand the various local issues and their stories. As you can see, for the timeline, community participation happened at various stages from the start of the project in 2018 till 2019, and came up with varied systems of design proposals that create a water neutral industry, a resilient neighborhood, and integrated protective coastal zone, amongst others. You may also look to work on transit oriented development, known as TODs, where maybe you are part of the team to develop the master plan, providing a comprehensive urban design strategy and guidelines to improve access and connectivity. And of course, with that, you also are involved in designing the public level experience, like enhanced sidewalks and streetscapes, bridges, new civic open spaces, and other development. During times of uncertainties like that one that we are kind of right now. Urban designers have an important role in being a mediator between the society and the government agencies, and thinking about how can such discussions translate into design strategies that may or may not be temporal in nature. It is also interesting to note here that even though going out and interacting with people is very essential for urban projects, uncertainties like these actually inform us about the different alternative mediums that we could use to collaborate and communicate, like obviously the use of digital technologies in our profession that we have been exploring intensively for the last 2 years. Um, Urban designers, after their graduate degree, may also work on architectural projects, but their approach to an architecture project may look to integrate various social, cultural, and political issues within their sites and their buildings. So it may be a museum project that translates social issues, or a healthcare project which is deep rooted within the community. I'm going to show another video, which was a project at the Butaro District Hospital at Rwanda by Mars Design Studio here.
I think a lot of times when we think about providing people in limited resource settings with healthcare, we think that any healthcare is better than no healthcare.
Usually when you go to clinics, there's no lights. People are like in the dark.
To show up in a hospital and to lay down in a bed and have to look out upon an entire ward of other sick patients represents a kind of factory-like setting of healthcare.
Mass has seen that around the world there's an opportunity for architecture to actually help improve the health outcomes of communities.
People cried when they saw three-dimensional renderings of what the hospital would look like someday and couldn't believe it. One woman said, "I don't believe this is for us. It must be a hotel. It must be something else."
There's this idea of equity to put a hospital state of the art in the middle of nowhere. It was not nowhere for everybody, because there are 300,000 people living there.
In our work, we actually see architecture operating at a range of scales. That means that we can affect health, everything from designing better furniture all the way up to national policy.
They always get the Haitian people involved in their work.
A patient should be comfortable, should be in an area that's well ventilated.
Patients have space to go out and sit in the sun and, take in some warmth.
People come on their days off to work on the grounds and make sure that the garden is well kept. They volunteer their time. Doctors describe that they want to work in this place. The staff wants to keep it clean. They say it's the cleanest hospital they've ever seen.
That's what we want for you. We want the best care. Best care doesn't mean good doctors, good nurses. It's best environment for you guys.
This place that is a place of healthcare could be much more, a community asset.
In the district around Butaro Hospital, in just the first couple of years that the hospital existed, we saw some of the most dramatic improvements in the health of that population that have been documented really anywhere in the world. Child mortality dropped by over 50% in just the first 2 years.
We have 96% of people with basic care covered through a health insurance. We dream of a country where access to care is for all.
This is for our community, for our people that are in the needs of it. It makes me feel good as a Haitian to be participating in it.
The Rwanda of today is the dream of the people of Rwanda. So we dream a beautiful future, and Butaro is a symbol of that.
So, as you can see, here urban designers, we have the opportunity to work on architecture projects which are more than the site itself, which talks about equity, social justice, and reform. Now, these are some of the organizations that I have outlined here that are working on multi-scale urban design projects across the world. And I encourage you to look at the kind of work they're doing for a better understanding of what I discussed so far. It is also essential to understand that while these may be big multinational companies, they may have smaller independent studios for urban designers that work in collaboration with engineers, planners, architects, economists, etc. So you should definitely think about that aspect too while looking up these organizations. Now, urban designers may also look at working on projects that are rooted and developed from within neighborhoods and communities. Environmental projects can also be developed at a scale of a neighborhood, and it can involve local people and urban design agencies coming together to address various local environmental issues. The project is usually developed from within the community. The actors are identified, and maybe the municipal agencies are then approached for discussions regarding implementation. So the Environmentalist Foundation of India works on such projects that identifies local lakes and ponds in neighborhoods that often bear the burden of human negligence, and recognizes that most of India's freshwater bodies are polluted or contaminated due to human activities, and the organization really focuses on scientific revival of these freshwater bodies through a community-based collaborative conservation effort. Another kind of brownfield project, sorry, that urban designers may work on are projects that identify issues that may be social, cultural, or spatial within a small section of a neighborhood, and then working alongside the people with the neighborhood to address such issues. A lot of the non-profit organizations work on these kind of projects, looking to make change by developing ideas integrated from within the lives of people. Sometimes in these sort of projects, there may not be any overlap with municipality or city agencies at all. So, working closely with the local people may be an approach to a brownfield or urban infill project as well. Like I mentioned, a lot of non-profit organizations are working closely with communities across the world. So the way these organizations work is through a lot of local level discussions and brainstorming. They design projects that would benefit the people. They identify and discuss the project with various stakeholders and apply for funding for such projects to be ultimately realized on ground. It is also interesting to note here that some of the smaller projects are also actually built by the local people. Um, Through various organizations, urban designers may also be involved in social work through education. Um, so this is as a project as part of Rotary International, where a group of my colleagues went to these various schools in remote villages and had open discussions about water, health, and sanitation with the school children. It was very interesting to have these discussions that really educated urban designers about the various challenges that the local communities in these villages were facing, and really informing people about public health, including water, sanitation, access to safe drinking water, disease control, etc. So examples of such organizations can be UNICEF or Rotary International. Now here I have again outlined a few of these organizations that work in the capacities that I just discussed. And if you're interested in such projects, I again encourage you to explore more. Um, Apart from local non-profit organizations, there are these international non-profit organizations also working to address various issues impacting communities across the world. An international non-profit organization like the UN Habitat looks at promoting socially and environmentally sustainable towns and cities with the goal of providing adequate shelter for all, Even though there is a lot of groundwork and overlapping ideas with local communities, the projects are essentially developed in a top-down approach, mainly because of the scale and funding involved. Another organization that you might be aware of is UNICEF, where some of the goals are child protection, education, designing social policies, gender equality related to children rights, etc. So urban designers can also look to work and be a part of driving change for children and young adults across the world as part of such organizations. So there are also other possibilities that you can look to explore as urban designers. So definitely activism is also a way that urban designers can work from within communities to bring out social, cultural, or political issues, and that can be in the form of graffiti or public installation or through websites or apps or through podcasts, etc. You can also consider a form of activism where you are working as part of an organization looking to understand the heritage of a city and what that really means to people, and thereby trying to conserve certain areas in a city and working with different people from various walks of life to build up consensus to protect such heritage. A lot of urban designers today are also choosing journalism as a way to express their ideas and thoughts about society and urban life in general. An example would be Michael Kimmelman, who is a professor of urban design at Columbia University and also a celebrated columnist for the New York Times. Journalism can also take the form of documenting urban scenarios through photography and using that to tell stories about different issues impacting societies or the environmental, political, cultural fabric of cities and towns. We also know that film also can be a really powerful tool for urban designers to use to tell stories both in the research, analysis, or design stages, as well as documenting the design. You can definitely look at agencies which make documentaries to advocate for change or to celebrate societies. Um, urban designers can also be part of organizations which work to bridge various aspects of the tangible and intangible layers of a city to the general public. For example, conducting tours or walks to inform people about, say, the heritage, the food places of historical importance, or even informing them about urban issues like recycling of waste, etc. So this was one such tour that was organized by Untapped Cities, discussing about issues of waste management at the Sims Municipal Recycling Waste Facility at Brooklyn. This is also a very interesting trajectory that a lot of urban designers are venturing into. That is the world of fashion. For example, the designer Carlos Gracia Velez, who is the professor at the urban planning and design department at GSD, draws the metaphor of cities being a melting pot of cultures and how that really inspires his clothing collection. Another architect and designer, Virgil Abloh, also looks at cities as an inspiration to his off-white fashion brand. So, of course, after your graduation, you may also look to be involved in academics and research, and you may be working in the framework of an university or organizations like the NIUA, National Institute of Urban Affairs, or Urban Think Tank, etc. And while doing so, it is also important, like, the research, the freedom of it, and what kind of way you actually contribute to the society, that also changes based on the scope of the project. Like for an example, while I was working with NIUA, so there was a particular study going on where we had to find out, how particularly the capital city Delhi, what is the distribution of informal and formal settlements over there. And this was the map we produced, which clearly shows that 60% of the city is being occupied by obviously the unauthorized settlements, and 40% by obviously planned settlements. And this data was definitely very, very exciting for us, and for an organization like NIUA, which obviously does research and kind of a powerful evidence to argue that cities need to change the way it should plan. But that same NIUA, when was working with DDA for the preparation of Delhi Master Plan, this particular map, when it was produced in-house and showed to Delhi Development Authority, they were not being at all interested about using this map in their document, because like the document they produce, it's a gazetted document, and being the government, the moment they produce such drawings or use such evidence, it somehow, because it's a legal document, gives some kind of acknowledgement to the informal settlements, and that's very scary and risky for them, and not for the planners but also for the politicians, because they always love to play with that trump card of legalizing these informal settlements. So yeah, the scope really differs, and how as researchers we are contributing, that also needs to be looked at, and we have to be careful about that. So these are the some many types of the projects and trajectories that you can explore after your urban design graduate degree. It is also important to mention here that sometimes it is not essential to have a degree in urban design to also be involved in these projects and fields, although having a definitely a broader outlook, that always helps. So we have almost reached the last segment of the presentation, and before concluding my session, I would also like to briefly talk about a few other things, technical stuff, like as urban designers, what kind of, so obviously drawing is one of our best communication medium through which obviously we communicate with clients and the bigger audience. So what kind of drawings generally we produce? How do we communicate? So if I quickly summarize, these are the 5 types of drawings as professional when you would be working in that capacity. You would be producing. So one is analytical diagrams, one is vision, concept, and strategy diagrams, one is structure plan, one is demonstration drawings, and development control regulations. Now these are also associated with various stages of a project. I will explain quickly, and these can be like like drawings you can actually produce for projects varying scales, like starting from a simple residential commercial complex design to a neighborhood master plan to a sectoral master plan, and to in fact for a city master plan, or kind of preparing a vision document for that. All of that can for that you can produce these types of drawings. So first thing is obviously analytical diagrams. You all know about that, like as designers, like you have given a site, you want to understand its potentials and constraints or whatever, like try to explore those opportunities and constraints, and decide how you want to engage with design. And for that you need to produce a series of diagrams which kind of explore these aspects, various aspects. Then obviously the vision and strategies. Now what happens for the difference between any architectural project and urban design is project is that urban design projects are very, very complex, and sometimes for architecture we kind of deal with a lot of single liners or kind of a very simple ideas, whereas for urban design projects that's not always the case. It becomes really difficult, and it's not always recommended to make it very simple also. So the vision statements are really complex, so it's very useful if we can unpack it through a series of diagrams, a strategy diagrams, and so if you see what is written on the screen, it was a vision developed for a hill-based master plan for IIT Mandi. And then once you unpack it through these different series of diagrams, it talks about simple things like building along the contours, then unobstructed views, then encouraging more social interactions, creating these walkable and accessible neighborhoods, educational neighborhoods, then climate responsive design, and minimizing disturbance to natural habitat. So once your vision strategies are ready, then you basically prepare the master plan. The master plan, obviously, it varies. The scales might vary. Sometimes it can vary from 200 hectares to simple 5 acres site. So based on that particular scale, then obviously we need to also understand what kind of details we want to put there. So that also varies. How you want to represent these master plans. And then the most important part here to understand that for urban designers, it is not always the case that the master plan what you are preparing for, you will be actually implementing the whole master plan in the later stage, because most of the cases when it's a big project, there are so many persons involved, so many stakeholders involved. So you may have developed the overall master plan, the strategies, the framework, the vision, but it will be actually in the end the kind of deliverable you would have is basically it's a series of plots and a few guidelines on related to those plots, and then the road network and the open space systems. That's all. But after that, other architects will be involved, or the builders will come. They will form certain groups, and then they will execute projects. So it is very important that whatever as urban designers we have envisaged through that master plan, that needs to be conveyed to the next group of people who is taking care of the actual implementation on ground. But parallelly, it shouldn't be too much of uh, prescriptive. It's more about the suggestion. So we create a kind of flexible framework. There are certain principles and things which are non-negotiable, and then there are a few suggestions which gives a little bit of freedom to these next group of creative practitioners who would be involved in this project, so that they can interpret also in their own way within the given framework. And that's why these demonstration drawings are very important. So whenever there is a particular parcel or particular project, you create different scenarios and you illustrate it through either aerial views or sectional perspectives or sections or whatever format. And then your report, your particular document actually includes all of them, and then the other people who will be actually following your document gets a series of ideas. So either they can choose one of your option only, or they can combine all three, or they can just understand the ideas behind it and interpret it in a completely different and creative way. So that is very important. And that's what I mentioned. The last series of drawings is basically the development control regulations what we produce. So it has to be easily accessible and needs to be demonstrated very easily. The way the current bylaws, if you see, are written, sometimes they're very difficult for any layman or a person who is not from architecture background to understand what it really says. So the wording and these supportive illustrations, what generally urban designers prefer to do, are really make these documents very accessible to all kind of people, and so that it ensures also that the cities are not, or the development is not only bound to happen through people like us, and so these documents need to be accessible in a way that all people like the layman, also the common people, can also understand the intent of any development across cities. And the tools, it is also very important, like what kind of tools we generally use as urban designers to produce these kind of essential drawings. So one is obviously sketching. It really helps because one is definitely it's easy to communicate, and you can engage with people very easily. And as I was talking about, like, it's more about a very participatory environment what we actually love to work in while dealing with urban design projects, because a lot of different interests are involved. So the moment you create such illustrations through sketching, it looks like it's not finished, and it gives a room for participation, so that the other stakeholders can also say like what needs to be done, and then you do a series of iterations. Also, it's sometimes economically very helpful. Like especially if you're working with certain organizations, MNCs, and the way it operates in India. We have for such large scale projects, sometimes we don't have the budget, but you need to produce a series of drawings or need to convey a lot of things to the client, to the different stakeholders. So if you're good with sketching, you can convey a lot of complex ideas very easily and efficiently, and the time for that you would require to invest would be more efficient than if you really want to develop it through different other kind of softwares. So that is one. Then obviously you have different 2D mapping softwares like AutoCAD, then Photoshop, InDesign, Illustrator. These are some of the softwares we also use in architecture. And then GIS, Maptioner, these are some of the softwares, and even space syntax. So these are becoming really relevant these days. And especially GIS is something really we as urban designers should learn to, learn from the beginning. And then for 3D modeling software, Google SketchUp is very basic. It's useful for our profession. And then in nowadays, Rhino, Grasshopper, these are some of the advanced softwares which also people are using. I would say not in our country mostly, but obviously in the outside, like in the Western world, in London, in the UK, US, and that kind of regions. And then obviously video editing software, that's are also helpful, because as you can understand the site and the challenges we face, as urban designers, it's quite huge, and these visuals really help to understand or document a site nicely. So depending upon where your interests lie, I would assume that you would either enroll in an university to pursue a graduate in urban design later on, or be associated with urban design as a practice. But if you're thinking about an urban design degree, I think from our experiences so far, it is really important for you to have an idea about what you really want to do after the program, although it is completely normal to discover various new avenues while studying. Um, so think about where you want to work as an urban designer and in what capacity and role. That should also help you to choose what university you want to apply to later on. For example, some of the schools may stress more on the intersection between architecture and urban design, while some may have more stronger intersections between landscape and urbanism, while others may be more research-oriented programs. Therefore, I think it's very essential that you choose a program and school very carefully. I think it will be also helpful if you contact the various universities before applying, especially getting in touch with professors to understand the kind of work they're doing, and with all discussions, sensitivity, knowledge making at school. So it is very, very important to remember that really is people that we are designing for or engaging with, and urban design is just that. We actually design for people. So thank you. So I'm sure there are a lot of other things, we could also discuss, starting from what kind of different, scholarships are there to go to these different schools, or how you prepare different portfolios and things like that. So if anyone is interested about anything later on, you're free to contact me, and I'd be happy to help. Yeah, so that's all I think for today.
Thank you, Debayan, for the talk. It was very elaborate and informative. So participants can now ask questions. You can also post your questions in the chat if you want to. So yeah, so now if anybody wants to ask a question, you can please unmute yourself and go ahead and ask. I think architect Rohan had
it was an excellent presentation. I must say that I'm really encouraged by the young professionals and coming to such a level, and that is what this Pariyar effort is all about, that we want to have young minds really giving solutions and we would encourage further participation also in our endeavors. I'm really, happy to hear such a fantastic presentation, see such a fantastic presentation. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, sir. So we do have a few questions in the chat. I think there is one by Anjum. She asks about the scholarships. If you can give a brief idea about scholarships.
Right. So yeah, it really depends, from regions to region. So for every country, they will have a series of scholarships. So one is obviously, like, if I just simply explain, one is obviously the universities. They will have their own scholarships, and then the other is, like, obviously through the government. Like, suppose, for example, if you are applying to the UK, so all the schools where you want to apply, they will have certain kind of scholarships. And if you're not going for that, then there is another kind of scholarships which is coming directly from the government. So like, for example, Commonwealth scholarships, Chevening scholarship. These are some of the scholarships which is funded by the government of UK. Whereas you also have scholarships like INLACS, which is actually funded by a private body based in India, and they also fund people who want to pursue their scholarships outside India, mostly in the US and UK and Europe region. So that is another kind of way. And then you have British Council. They also have a scholarship called the Great Scholarship. But the funding amount that generally varies. Like scholarships like Commonwealth and Chevening, they actually give you the full package, starting from airfare to the visa allowance to warm cloth allowance to your tuition fee and even the maintenance stipend, the monthly allowance what you get. Whereas for scholarships like INLACS, they will only provide you the tuition fee and the maintenances. And scholarships like Great, that will only cover your tuition fee, and that's true for actually the university scholarships also. They will also be mostly trying to cover the tuition fee, but not necessarily giving a maintenance fee. At least for masters, like for PhDs, it's easier because they generally include in the package, but not for masters. In that way, you are basically halfly covered, but the rest of it you either need to take a loan or do your own investment. So that kind of a thing. And again, like, it varies, as I said, like, in US you will have Fulbright and then other university scholarships also. Similarly, for Germany, you have DUD and then the other kind of scholarships. Every region has its own government scholarship, and then you have these other university scholarships. And obviously their application procedures are very difficult in terms of the timeline sometimes. Like, again, another simple example, like, the Commonwealth scholarship, where you apply that you need to do it at two levels. So it has, the first nomination will be through the ministry or like the government of India. So it has a different deadline versus you have to again apply to the Commonwealth Scholarship Commission in the UK, and that has a different deadline. And all of that, also, like, for the ministry, you need to have a offer letter in advance. Unless you have an offer letter, you can't apply there. So if that's the case, then you also need to see, like, how that timeline is matching with your particular course where you are applying. It might be sometimes the case that the deadlines they have for the scholarship, to apply for it, you have to actually apply to the university 1 year prior to it, and then you have to defer your offer and use it for that particular cycle of applications. So yeah, I think, yeah, that would be my response, like, briefly, if I say.
So yeah, we do have a few more questions in the chat, but before that, if anybody also wants to ask a question, then please go ahead.
Hi, I want to ask a question. Rohan this side.
Yep. Please go ahead, Rohan.
So thanks for the amazing presentation. It was very uh, uh, descriptive and elaborate. So basically, I wanted to ask you, what are your views on, like, challenges in urban design in India specifically, where, like, there are so many layers involved, like such as politics and everything, and also there are, like, various economic levels of people where, like, for certain people it's considered urban design, but, like, for example, like Sabarmati river development project, where for political reasons or whatever, like, as a urban design, it was presented as a whole development project of the river. But many people also had to lose their home because of the development near the riverfront. So how complex does it get in a country like India, where like there are like so many players involved?
Right, right. Thanks, Ron. I think it's a very important question, and I mean, as I was mentioning that because urban design is a very new profession and it's still evolving, and especially in a context like India, which is basically it's a developing context. It's very you can understand, like, for such a new profession to make its place and play efficiently. And the issues you have raised, it's not just about India. It's about even if you go to US, UK, everywhere these problems are still there. Like, even if they have been practicing urban design so actively for so many years, but still these problems there. But if you still you want me to share my views about how India, what is the problem of practicing urban design here, I would definitely say that still now the way at least I have seen urban design, the way the government pursue it or envisage it or try to apply it is always related to this beautification of a particular city or a particular place. And that's why when it becomes very superficial and very cosmetic kind of thing, then obviously the idea is only to make that place beautiful, and you really don't care about what people are thinking, or how what is that something the local communities are really wanting from that project. It always becomes a top down approach where the government or the particular politician who is behind that project has his or her own view, and they want to impose it through you as a consultant or as a service provider. And we use our knowledge to actually transfer their dream to the reality, whereas it should be the other way around. Like, we should be actually helping people to realize their dream on the ground. And that is the biggest thing. And the example you have taken, like Sabarmati, from Sabarmati to like what's happening in Delhi, the Central Vista project, and everywhere, like you can see that is like where everything is like completely driven by the government and the ruling party and their own vision. And that is the most challenging part, I think. And when you are working for the government, that is the tussle you would always face across various scales. uh, Whereas and even for the MNCs, because the MNCs operate in a way that they always try to please the client, and most of the cases urban designers would be actually working for government, because that is the kind of scale of project we deal with. Mostly public projects. We have also private clients, but that percentage would be much lesser. So this is what it's very very challenging. I think that is one. The second is obviously the data, like the kind of information you already have. Like, suppose when I was working for Delhi master plan, just to get the data from these different authorities, from Delhi government, it was so difficult to do it. And I was not working as a private consultant. I was working with NIV, which is another government institute. So even from government to government, the transfer of data, the transfer of knowledge, that trust, that consensus, everything is missing. So it takes a lot of time to bring all these people at the same level, and the power relations they have, who wants to dominate whom, and all these things are continuously happening. So once you are into this profession, I feel slowly you will feel like you will realize that design is is the last thing you do, and you basically start with understanding these processes, these institutional mechanisms, and these, like, how you want to realize your dream and how you want to implement your ideas on ground. That becomes the biggest challenge in our society. And I don't think none of the urban designers, my professors, starting from there to us, we all are still trying to figure out the ways to do it and how we can do it in a more inclusive way, in a more efficient way. We're still trying to evolve, and it would be that way because we are still grasping it.
Tushar, I want to say
Yes, sir.
something.
Yes, sir, please, sir.
Debayandu, I have a completely contrasting experience than what you have said.
Yeah.
I have done redevelopment of Connaught Place. A government authority engaged me.
Right.
And it all depends on a professional, that how they pursue their project. It is, my experience is, government never dictates. The government engages a mind, a professional, for a purpose. That purpose is to do public good. If a professional does not understand what is public good, and he starts asking the client, what do you want? And I'll provide you that. Then you get into a mess like Sabarmati. My experience in Connaught Place, which is possibly the only urban renewal comprehensively done project in the country as on date, is that at every step, I could do exactly what is expected out of a professional. But the whole idea is that you have to bring in the right idea. You have to pursue it. You need to have a passion to do your work the way you want to think. And you make others understand who are the decision makers as to what is required at this point of time. In Connaught Place, we did restoration. But the first decision we took was that there will be nothing which will be constructed over ground. And you would see now that there is a 1.5 kilometer tunnel which is constructed, carries all the services. There's nothing on ground. We said soft area will be increased. We demonstrated it to the client by design that all the car parking, whatever you want to have, it can remain, but here is an alternative to do it. And that would bring, in terms of environmental value, something good to happen. Not even once I experienced that I cannot do what I want to do. At no point of time there was a difficulty in convincing a person, because I had a backup team, I had professionals from all required professions, and we could give the right kind of a decision to them. Yes, it is very painful when you have to do this and you know that the other side is sometimes not responsive. But believe me, that whomsoever government engages is one of the brilliant persons of this country. They only come in public service. So if you logically explain to them that what is required to be done and what is the best alternative for you, including the alternative which he has in mind, you present the outcome of that to them, I'm sure we would never have a difficulty of getting what is required to be achieved. The problem is with the MNCs. Let me point it out with my experience. That they work, they allocate a time for something. They only want to do copy paste. They only want to fill papers, but they do not bring in what is appropriate for a place. In most cases where I have reviewed MNC's work, it had no connect with the place at all. They wanted to borrow something from UAE. They wanted to borrow something from US. They wanted to actually copy paste whatever they had done somewhere else. Engage those who have no passion. They engage professionals who are on salary, who are on job. The assessment of their work is done by those who have no experience of life, not of urban design, not of architecture, but no experience of life. And that is why this profession has not moved forward. But if you would ask me, you ask your teachers, they will say exactly what you are saying. If you ask me, I say no. The responsibilities of a professional, responsibility of those who are entrusted that work, that how passionately they do, how much time and mind they devote by themselves in working out something which will do something good, which has flexibility, which has potential to adapt to new situations. The problem lies with professional. Problem does not lie with government. Problem lies with MNCs who are allocating time, that I have allocated 10 hours for this, finish it, whatever, good, bad, do it and done. No. So this is what needs to be changed. This is what needs to be changed. The mindset of professionals who are graduating, that must change. Mindset of institutions, which still think that they can deal with the processes and get away with it. No, you have to reach to the point of a solution, demonstrate it by your own design, get it executed at site. There is no one to stop you from doing good work. It is your mindset which matters. That you, the school, SPA, at least I can say, SAP, they are thinking that they can get away with only teaching processes and not bring in right solution. In my time, when we were at SPA, we would take live projects and make sure that what we do in third year studio, fourth year studio, or urban design studio is put across to the municipality, it is developed in partnership with them, and it gets implemented. If schools would hesitate because they have no confidence as on today that they can reach to the solution. So that is why they are stuck at processes. And this is what they are inculcating in the professionals which they are training, that no, it is very difficult to work with government. Government doesn't let you do this because you don't do your work. That's the problem. So I have positive experience. Maybe I have done 20 urban design projects, street development project, riverfront development. Connaught Place redevelopment is in front of everybody. Yes, it is possible.
I totally
Thank
agree
you,
with
sir.
what you were saying. But yeah, like maybe as I said, like, like when I also did like whatever little experience I have, the team with whom I was involved with MNCs as well as the the government itself, like I have worked with wonderful people. I can't say that they didn't have good intentions, but I have seen that the full repulsion was actually from the governments, and they were trying to get money out of it. They were expecting bribes from us. They were doing a lot of
No, it's not correct.
things.
Not correct at all.
No, but
Because
I
you
have
don't do your
experience,
work. That
sir.
is why you end up bribing. You end up bribing because you don't do your work.
No,
Because you
no,
want
sir.
your fee.
No,
So
sir.
you have
No, sir.
not done
It's
your
not
job
that.
properly.
We did our job, and to get the sanction, they were actually expecting money from us. So I have experienced that.
No, not correct. Not correct. That's a bad experience for
Yeah,
bad work
exactly.
done. You
I mean,
only
that's what
need to
I'm saying.
bribe
Like, it's
somebody
from
when
my
you are not up
experience.
to the mark. When you are not up to the mark, you have no choice but to bribe somebody to collect your fee. No choice, absolutely. Absolutely, because I can say with authority, 40 years of practice, not one time any bribe. Whatever my professional team wanted to do, they have been able to do. There was no one to stop. The easiest client in the country is government, because they do not have knowledge, and that is why they have hired you. So when it comes to knowledge input, nobody objects to what you do. There is not one government officer who has ever told me that what I have designed is not what he wants. He does not even know that subject, so he has never objected. His only demand is, when would tender be issued? Please do prepare the estimate quick, fast. I have to tender it. Design, then no one has ever interfered. So if you see bad design at Sabarmati, the professional is responsible, not government. If you see bad work at Kashi Vishwanath development, if it is not to your liking, it is the problem of professional. There was nobody to stop you. So change the view completely. Do your work properly. Do good architecture, do good urban design. There is no one to stop you. There's no one to stop you. Once you are assigned that work, anything you do would get implemented. That is not a problem. Problem is our own mindset, that we keep on asking questions but don't give answers ourselves. And we always say, you have not given me data. No problem. You don't need data for everything. You need idea first. So do you have an idea to deal with the problem? Then you ask for a data. You ask for a data and do nothing at your end, you are in a mess. And the country is in a mess because of that. So it is the training of the professional which is a problem at this moment. Okay.
Okay, thank you, sir. We are already quite a bit, I think, over time, but
Overshot.
we have like a few questions in the chat. So we'll just like these three questions are the last questions that we'll be discussing, and then we'll close the session. So the first question is by Sanobar. We discuss community development, spatial justice, environmental sensitivity, etc. as separate trajectories in urban design. At the risk of sounding idealistic, shouldn't all of these be looked at collectively for our cities? What are your thoughts on a multidisciplinary approach to urban design, starting from education and architecture schools?
Yeah, I mean, like the way I have structured it, maybe I have separated it because not to say that they should be looked at in isolation. Like these are some of the things which are always part of every project we should be actually talking about, and that's what we have been discussing now also. Like through the other discussions we had, like so I think yeah, definitely, and as I said, like from the very definition of urban design, it's basically urban design is a discipline which actually intersects with various disciplines, and that's why that multidisciplinary sort of approach what you were talking about, it has to be there from the very beginning. And unfortunately, in the current education system in most of the schools, if you see in India, they don't allow you to do it. You as a professional, you always work in silos, and that kind of continues in the profession also. These different experts, when they come with their views, they don't want to merge or collaborate with each other. So that's one of the again biggest challenge in the way we are operating here. But yeah, that's not the actually, that should be the way of approaching it, definitely.
Okay, so the next question is by Pratibha. As you mentioned, urban designers can act as bridges between communities and various organizations, government and other development agencies. Would you like to learn more about how you approach and involve the general public and local stakeholders in your own practice/projects?
Yeah, I mean, again, I haven't I have an experience of 7 to 8 years of working in urban design in different countries, and the few projects which are, I would say, was really participatory. For that, I think what I have understood is, with any kind of difficult or challenging context, uh, uh, like to work around people, to understand their opinion, you need to spend a lot of time with them and to build the trust with them, to understand what they really want from you. And that is the biggest difficulties, I think, we have when we talk about approaching the communities. And that's not an easy task, but that's the basic thing, basic principle. So I can take an example where I was working with Kolkata Scottish Heritage Trust for a community-led development in Kolkata. It was around Scottish cemetery area, and basically the project was challenging because the project started as a conservation project of Scottish cemetery. So basically, as you understand, it's a Scottish heritage, and the Scottish, obviously those people have left, and now that particular Kolkata Scottish Heritage Trust, they wanted to actually renovate that particular precinct. But when they started doing that, the local communities, basically it was surrounded by a lot of slum dwellers who are actually from Bihar, UP, and all that side, and they started actually protesting against it. And obviously, everyone was surprised that why is it happening? That we want to develop our own project. Why are you, kind of, protesting? And you know, so what's the reason behind agitation? And then slowly we understood that because these people all were living in slums, obviously that means they don't have the government is not actually willingly acknowledging their rights, and they know that the moment this particular place will be renovated, it will be open for tourists. And the moment it opens for tourists, and because of the location of the cemetery, it's at the center of the city, it will start raising the real estate value, and then the government will be more willing to put a lot of real estate development over there, and there will be a lot of other powerful people who will come into the picture, and these people will be forced to go somewhere else. And it's basically it's a issue of gentrification, and they have their livelihoods, their daily economic activities, whichever way they are engaged with. So all of that is happening there. So how will they survive? So that was the kind of idea, and that was the fear they had inside. But the way they started showing protest, like we couldn't understand that from the beginning, and then slowly we had to turn that project into a community led development, and where we had to organize a lot of workshops with these people, with the women, with the children, and trying to get their views on it. And it took more than 5 years for us to understand what the kind of programs we can prepare, so that these people also start associating themselves with this particular project. And then this whatever these proposals and these upliftment is happening, it's not inside the cemetery but outside also, and then it becomes a place not for the tourists but for the locals. And so yeah, so listening and trying to understand their needs. So these slum women were like they needed some kind of vocational training workshops to kind of get involved themselves with these different economic activities, as well as there were a lot of issues of dropout children, and these children were actually using the cemetery space for taking drugs and all that. So we had to open up certain weekend schools, and all that came up through these different close interactions with the community. So yeah, that's what I'm like. I would suggest, listening, building trust. These are the two major things. How you actually open that room for participations, and then you go along with it, and you kind of develop your strategies accordingly.
So thank you. The last question is again by Anjum. If a student worked on urban development project on an ongoing environmental issue, then can it be pitched to the government? If yes, then how?
Honestly, I can definitely say that, yeah, definitely this is possible, and there are a lot of people who does that, but I haven't done it really on my own, so I won't be able to tell you the exact mechanisms of do it. Maybe sir can give some insights if possible, because still I'm new to this profession.
Mehta sir, will you be able to give some insights on this question? Sir, are you sure?
Hello.
Yes, sir, you're audible.
Are you saying?
Acha, sir, so the
Tushar?
question is about, yes, sir. So the question is about if a student worked on an urban development project on an ongoing environmental issue, can
Yeah.
it be pitched to the government? And if yes, then how?
See, and let me share with you what I used to do many years ago. That if there is an idea about anything, what you have, we would make a quick design solution, because that is our intervention, and we share with concerned authorities. Now, what Periyar School can do, that if you have an idea, we can bridge that gap of presenting it to respective authority, and gradually it will become a force to reckon with. My time, we used to do it on our own. You see, if you would see in Delhi, Ames flyover, Dholakua flyover, they became different than the conventional, because some of us offered a quick design solution to respective authority that please look at it differently. We may not get the project, but a thought process will start. And that resulted in a competition, because Delhi Urban Arts Commission was the forum where we had presented these designs. We said that we learned that government has done it and we have something else to say. Please hear us. And they heard us. And then they said, I told government that it may be a good idea that you organize a design competition for these flyovers and get them done. Otherwise, you would have seen exactly the conventional flyovers at Ames and at Dholakua. So if you think, you see, the best is that a school does it. But I understand the present situation of the schools, because most of the teachers actually have no idea of what the practical part of the life is and what actually works and what doesn't work. They keep talking and talking. So that's the problem with all the schools, be it architecture, be it urban design, and so on. Our teachers are no more from practice. So that's an issue. So institutions have actually shirked this responsibility. They were given up, and they think and they keep on blaming that the government is not receptive. Nobody wants to understand, and that's not correct. Absolutely. So as a professional, if you want to create an image for yourself and you think you are in a place where there is something which bothers you and you have a solution to it, please do it. Send it to respected authority, exhibit it. Prasanna Desai is doing it in Pune. I have done it in Delhi. There are many who have done it like that. Expect nothing in return except that there will be a change in thought process. If that is your expectation, you will succeed. I have no doubt about it. If you still have hesitation, get back to Periyar School. We will put it across for you. This is what I can say.
So thank you, sir. So Anjum, as sir rightly said, that if you want us as a school to take your to like bridge the gap between you and the authority, then we would also be very glad to help you with that. So you can contact us anytime about it as well. I think with this, I would like to close today's session. So before closing, I would like to inform everyone about the Every Friday webinar series being organized by the Periyar School of Architecture. The webinars are a platform for young professionals to express their ideas and is aimed at students and young architects. Further, as Sir explained, we would also be running short-term courses in summer schools, and the information for all of this will be presented to everyone. I thank Debayan for his talk today. I also thank Kamal sir and Mehta sir for their presence and their thoughts. With this, I would like to end today's webinar. I also thank all the participants. Please have a good day. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Tushar. Thank you, everyone.